Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a trust recession. That's right. The recession is not just an economic one, it's also about trust. People no longer trust businesses and even people. People no longer trust businesses, operators, whether it be multifamily investors, syndicators. We are no longer just blindly trusting and hoping that things will work out. There is a lot of skepticism out there, and folks are not happy. So, how do you raise capital in a trust recession? Well, today we sit down with Todd Heitner, and Todd is behind Apartment Investor Pros, and he's going to help you understand how you build trust in a trust recession. If you're looking to raise capital for deals, you know that it's been harder than it has been over the last few years. That doesn't mean that it's impossible. If you want to break through and find success, check out today's conversation right here on Multifamily Insights. Todd Heitner has for 20 years been serving real estate investors, helping them with their online presence with a focus on multifamily apartments and multifamily syndication for over a decade. But he saw too many capital raisers struggling because they lacked the strategy to effectively market to investors. So now he helps provide a couple of educational programs to help people effectively attract investors, especially by leveraging other people's audiences. Let's welcome to the show, Todd Heitner.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Todd, it's great to have you. We actually had you on a while back, so it's great to get you back on the show here. For our listeners who are not familiar with you and your background, why don't you take 2 minutes and give us a little bit of context?
Yeah, sure. I started out helping single family investors, like getting with their online presence and things like that. And then we kind of, over 10 years ago, we moved into the multifamily space, helping, we saw a need there. People needed to look professional if they were going to attract investors. They need to look like a real business. People are going to Google you, but I also saw that people were struggling with that. They'd spend, 10 months building their website and all that. So we kind of helped them out with like having a lot of stuff pre-made. We have, designs, content, all that kind of stuff already ready to go so that, people can get up and running quickly without having to like devote months of time and focus that when they should be instead talking to brokers and investors and things like that. So we still do that today. And but as you mentioned, we now have kind of branched into helping with more of the strategy, because like the tools are great, but if you don't know how to use them effectively, you don't have the strategy to support it, then it's going to limit your success. So yeah, we've kind of helped with, you know, leveraging other people's audiences, like leveraging your time the best possible way to get in front of as many, potential investors as possible, but also in a way that's going to be well received. So you're attracting rather than chasing, as well as, leveraging. Of course, AI is a big buzzword today. So, but it's very powerful, but only if you use it correctly. And so, also leveraging that to create content and things like that builds trust with investors rather than scaring them off. So,
Yeah, Todd, our listeners are familiar with our conversation around raising capital, attracting capital for real estate, right? That's something that we talk about a lot. But the times have changed, right? The times where, 3, 4 years ago, where you could go out there, make a post on social media and raise $1 million. That is really not the situation most investors face today. Talk about how times have changed and also how you are helping others adjust.
yeah, I heard something recently that kind of stood out to me, and like somebody said that we're in a trust recession,
Mm.
and I spent quite a bit of time thinking about that because I realized, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That it kind of explains why things have gotten a little bit harder. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, things have gotten harder, and I think multifamily, um, at least as much as anything else, maybe more so. I mean, in the last couple of years, a lot of investors have been burned on bad deals and things too, on top of things that are happening all over, that affect everybody. So, um, and I spent a little time kind of digging into like, why is that? Why is there such, because I was just curious, like, why are we seeing this? And, I think some of it, there's a collapse of institutional trust. People, don't trust what's in the news. Everything's biased. People have been overpromised and underdelivered, for too long. A lot of scams out there. There's so much fake stuff today. There's, fake reviews. Everything is AI generated. And we're just bombarded with so much stuff. There's, marketing overload. There's uncertainty in the market. There's just so many different things going on. And people don't trust businesses as much. They kind of, when we go to Amazon, we don't, if the product says, description says one thing, but the reviews say something else, we're going to trust the reviews because we've been lied to by businesses before, and so there's just a lot of factors I think that kind of play into that. But it just means that our job as marketers, and whatever business you're in, you are a marketer, and so syndication is no exception to that. But our job has gotten harder, to try to get people's trust, and I think it's become more important than ever to be authentic, to be real, to be, to have integrity and do what you say you're going to do, and be transparent. So that's kind of what I've seen. I think is that, and so I think what we need to think about is like, how can I gain people's trust? How when when people are skeptical and they have a hard time trusting anyone, like how do I gain their trust? So that's kind of what we've kind of looked at, and which I'm happy to share, some strategy with that too. But
Yeah,
that's
no, we definitely would jump into that. So you
yeah,
talked about the trust recession, and I love that wording because it's something that I know a lot of people feel, but maybe didn't have the words or the phrase to capture that. But this trust recession, I'm looking at it from what you described as more of a macroeconomic situation where you have the overall economy struggling, you have AI taking over, so you don't know if this is real, if this AI, is this a bot, are you talking to a real person? You don't know some of these things anymore. Businesses in general have lost trust, right? Because of just the way many of them operate. So people are trusting more peers or trusting more what other folks say, whether it be Amazon reviews and things like that, not really trusting what companies say. So at a macro level, there's this trust recession. And then in the multifamily space, I know I've seen that not just with multifamily, but investors, but particularly when it comes to syndication. A couple of years ago, most folks who were investing were making great money on those investments. You didn't hear about deals that were not panning out, deals failing. You didn't hear about that. I mean, if you bought properties in 2018, 20, 21, from that time frame, it was gold, right? Everybody was exiting those deals, 2.5 equity multiple, 3x returns in 18 months, like just crazy performance. So people felt that it just couldn't lose. And that is not the case today, where a number of deals have paused distributions. A number of deals have done capital calls. A number of deals are upside down, and investors may or are likely to lose money, or if not, just make back their initial principal. So that trust that folks once had as limited partners, LP investors, that is not as prevalent as it is today. I mean, if you do a quick Google search, you're going to see way more negativity than you would have 3 years ago. So that trust recession, as you alluded to, that's happening at a macro level, and it's certainly happening at the lower level, the micro level, when it comes to multifamily syndications. You are starting to transition to talk about how investors, particularly syndicators, can win and earn trust in this trust recession. Give us some examples there.
yeah, and maybe just briefly, just mention like what people sometimes do that doesn't work. That and maybe with the
Here's
context.
what not to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. With the context of the trust recession, you can see why even more this doesn't work. But I see a lot of people doing cold outreach to try to get investors, and they just jump right into a pitch. So I mean, like a LinkedIn. You go on LinkedIn and it's a message from somebody you don't know, and you think, oh, maybe it's a potential investor, but no, it's somebody pitching you on something that you don't know who they are, you don't care about what they're offering. And I see syndicators doing that too, capital raisers. Not long ago, I got a text message out of the blue from some number I don't have, and there is somebody with an investment opportunity. I'm like, who is this, and why are they messaging me? I finally realized that somebody I had one conversation with like 5 years ago. Now they're reaching out to me asking for money. So that didn't work great even before the trust recession, because you don't you need to have a relationship there. But now even more so, it's so important. And so because with just reaching out to people and asking for money up front, like there's no trust there. You don't trust the person, and your guard is all the way up. And as opposed to just to kind of transition into what works better, just as opposed to like getting a cold pitch from somebody you don't know. Imagine like your friend sends you a text and it tells you about this new restaurant they tried, and so and this is awesome, and you got to try this. Um, like it's both our recommendation for a business, but one of them, there's trust there. And when it's your friend, like you're going to start looking up and start making plans to go because you trust your friend, and there's that carries a lot of weight. And so the same thing with investors, there's somebody that they trust already. So what if you could get referrals, warm referrals from somebody that they already trust? That would be like getting that recommendation from a friend, because the guard is down. They trust that person making the recommendation. So there's a higher level of trust from that very first interaction. So that's kind of the key, is figuring out who do your ideal investors already trust, and then creating some kind of a win-win situation where they refer investors to you one way or another.
Yeah, you talk about warm referrals, right? Understanding what doesn't work. That cold outreach, the dude you met 5 years ago at a networking event and haven't talked to since, calling him or texting him out of the blue 5 years later, that's not a great strategy, right?
Right.
Also, the person who just walks around handing out their business cards nonstop like that also is not a good strategy. You're talking about really building relationships. So that trusted friend, that trusted advisor, that's the individual who you really want to be, because those are the people you're going to listen to. Even if the opportunity is not right for you, you're at least going to take that phone call or at least evaluate the opportunity if it's somebody you respect and trust. So the closer you can get to establishing that relationship, the easier it's going to be to raise capital. So I know for a lot of people, part of the challenge that they face when it comes to capital raising, right? When I'm talking to my coaching clients, folks in our mastermind group, over the years, everyone we've kind of interacted with, there's always a little bit of a hesitation of putting themselves out there, right? They want to raise money. Maybe they've got a couple of friends or family members who they think they could talk to, but they're hesitant to reach out. They don't want to ask these people to invest. How do you advise your clients to approach that initial conversation about investing in their deals?
Um, I would say that, if it's somebody you already have a relationship with, just start by being a real human being and just having a normal conversation about something. Like, take an interest in them, find out what's going on with them, and see if you can steer it toward that. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. If you find out what's going on with them and you realize they're going through a hard time financially, like, okay, don't pitch them on it on investing with you. But you might see, though, like, okay, they're, the conversation, you might be able to steer it naturally in that direction. Um, like, you don't have to make it weird, just have a conversation, care about them. Like, I think that's where you start to genuinely care about the other person, listen to them, hear what they're saying, and then see, like, is this a good fit? And if so, you can steer it that direction. Like, you can tell them what you're working on. If you're taking an interest in them and what they're doing, then naturally they're going to want to know what's going on with you too. That's just kind of how it goes. And you can talk about that, see if there's interest there. If not, you maybe stay clear of it, and that's fine. Not every conversation is going to go that direction, but if it does, then great. And then um, got you've you've led with value, you've led with trust, and I think that's goes a long way.
And it's fragile, right? Because I mean, if you go out and you just start pitching your buddy out of the blue and they're not expecting it, right? They thought you guys were going out to get a beer, and next thing you know, they sound like they're in a multi-level marketing pitch. Like, you're gonna lose and, and
Yeah,
erode that trust right away. So
for
there
sure.
is a kind of a delicate approach to have. One of the things I always tell like our clients, and one thing that helped me is, like you said, focus on the relationship and just share what you're doing. And instead of trying to pitch somebody, I always position it as, hey man, here's what I'm working on. Do you know anybody who might be interested in something like this?
Right.
And by doing that, you remove the pressure from them to say yes or no, I'm interested, or yes or no, I can invest or have the money. But you also still give them a chance to make a warm referral or that introduction, like you were just saying, right? I mean, if you're someone that they trust and like, they may or may not know as much about investing, but they probably have a friend or someone in their network who is interested or has been talking about real estate. And at a minimum, now you've kind of given them some context as they go out into the world and connect with other folks. They may have someone. I can't tell you how many times people have done that to me where, you know, I kind of said what I was doing, mentioned that to them, and not much happens in that conversation. But a week or two later, they say, hey, man, I was just talking to this guy. He told me he was interested in investing in real estate. I told him we should talk to you. And there you go. So
Yeah.
I definitely think, approaching the conversation with integrity and a true curiosity of getting to know the individuals. What are they working on? If it's a fit and you can accelerate that, awesome. But also don't be afraid to take your time and build a relationship. I mean, I want to go back to where you said, right? You don't want to do this cold outreach, but just because someone's not ready today doesn't mean they're never going to be ready to invest with you.
Yeah.
Some people, this may be the first time they've heard about this. And I don't know about you, but when your average person thinks about real estate investing, they think about being a landlord, They may think about flipping houses like HGTV, or they think about being a real estate agent, which is not even being an investor, right? But oh, you're like a real estate agent. I'm like, no, that's not at all what I do, right?
Yeah,
So
no.
they don't understand this concept of apartment syndication, right? So it may take someone time to understand what in the world you actually mean. What do you do? Is this legal? How come I never heard of it? There's a whole process that people need to go through, and they're probably not going to ask you all those questions at the same time, right? So
Right.
there's got to be an education time frame that exists, and you kind of have to let people evolve and get more comfortable with this idea over time if you want to build that relationship and get those investors. Talk to me about the trust. One thing you mentioned before was kind of leveraging other people's audiences or leveraging the trust of other people who already have this established relationship. Elaborate on
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah, sure. And I think maybe first I'll illustrate it because it helps to kind of see what it looks like,
Yeah.
just how the context can change. And so, just for an example, like we sometimes would go to multifamily events. Sometimes as a sponsor, we'd have a little booth for our business back there. People would come up and talk to us, and but mostly they just came up to like take a free chocolate off our table and hope we didn't try to sell them something. But um, at this one event, we were doing that. Just few people came by and talked to us, not too much. But then at this event, I was speaking, so I got on stage, I talked, for a few minutes, shared some value. Like the person, the host, introduced me as an expert, told what I did, and just speaking for a few minutes. When I went back, like we had a constant line of people waiting to talk to us, and they were signing up for our service left and right because and the thing is, like, nothing changed about me, nothing changed about my offer. It was all the context. Like now, somebody that they trust introduced them to me, and or me to them, and now they had a different perspective on things. So now they were approaching me rather than me trying to chase after them. Um, and just to be clear, I'm not saying people have to get up and speak on stage. That's just one example of how you can leverage somebody else's audience, but there's two things that make that work. One is first off knowing who you're targeting. So if you just some people say they'll take anybody with money, to for capital raising, and on the surface that kind of makes sense, but when you think about it, it's kind of like going fishing and saying, I'll take any kind of fish, so I'm not going to put any bait on the hook because I know certain kinds of fish won't like that kind of bait. And when you take anyone, you kind of sometimes end up with no one because you kind of have to know who you're targeting, who is your ideal investor, and just a really simple example, and this has probably been used a lot, but let's just say you were going to target doctors. Well, now once you know who you're talking to, it opens up all kinds of possibilities because there are places that doctors hang out. There's people that they trust. There are podcasts they listen to, events they go to, journals they read, professionals that they already trust. And so knowing who you're going to target, and it doesn't have to be a profession, it can be a lot of different things like people that are retired or people that, there's a lot of different ways you can target people, but that's a simple example. And then the second thing that makes it work is for you to be introduced to that audience by the person they trust. So if somebody listens to a certain podcast, they trust that podcast host, and if you could be on that podcast, some of that trust is transferred to you because the host isn't going to have somebody on that, they think isn't going to deliver value. Or there's, certain professionals that maybe doctors use, maybe a CPA that specializes in doctors. But getting that person to recommend you to their clients can be really powerful. Or going on that podcast or whatever, getting in front of that audience in one way or another, because now you don't have a cold audience. You have someone that's already warmed up. They're already seeking you out because, it's kind of like when your friend recommended a restaurant, you're going to look it up. And that's kind of what happens there. So there's different ways of applying this strategy, but, basically getting in front of somebody else's audience that already has your ideal investors all in one place. It could be, besides like podcasts and things, it could be CPAs, financial advisors, business attorneys, wealth managers. There's a lot of different types of consultants that could refer investors to you. Um,
Yeah, you talked about two things, right? One is understanding who are you targeting, and then a second is based on that target, who has that relationship, who has the audience that you could get in front of. You gave the doctor example, which I smirked at because that's the very typical, common audience that many people are looking to target and kind of go after. I've had clients who told me they wanted to target doctors, yet they have zero connection to the medical community.
right.
Can you talk about the importance of identifying your target, but also trying to figure out why you would resonate with that audience.
Yeah, you have to like you have to know that audience. You know, to be able to speak to them, you have to understand their pains, their struggles, what keeps them up at night. And if you have no connection to that, like you're guessing, and you can do that, but you're not likely to resonate as much with them unless it ideally maybe you have a direct connection to that industry. You were in it yourself, or a family member, or something like that. But a friend, a close friend, somebody where like what they're dealing with. Because if you don't understand where they're coming from, then you don't know. I mean, everything in business is about solving a problem, and if you don't know what problem they're trying to solve, and you're just guessing, you're not really going to resonate with them. They're not going to. Um, what you're talking about is not what they care about, and so and it just also would feel a little more. I guess not so authentic, if you're trying to target them, but you know nothing about them, so they're gonna. It can kind of erode the trust, I guess, too, if they're just like, okay, you're just targeting me because I have money. It's probably not going to go over so well.
And that's exactly it, right? I mean, we talked a lot about trust, and the audience has to trust you, right? And if you're just
Yeah.
targeting them because you know that they have money, that's not going to be a good way to build that trust. I think of another one is professional athletes, where they certainly have had their guards up because there's so many people who are going after them, right? These are mostly public figures. People can look up their salaries and how much money they made exactly. So they are guarded. And if you don't understand that community, if you don't understand, some of the nuances of what it means to be a professional athlete, they're going to be very guarded. So it takes that warm referral, to break in or to have that connection. It's going to take somebody they already trust to make that introduction. Because if you're just going after them because you say, "Hey guys, I help multimillionaires invest in apartments," they're like, "I don't know you. You sound like every other shark who's been trying to get after my money since I signed my first
Yes.
contract." Right. So
Right.
it's the same thing when it comes to investments and with doctors or whatever profession you're choosing. So yes, there's some who are naturally going to make more money, but it is important to make sure that you can actually connect with them. When we talk about earning trust, again, I say earning trust. It's not just given to you. You have to earn
Right.
that. And that takes time. They're going to be, questioning you as well just to make sure you're a fit. And if you can't pass the sniff test and answer some basic questions, you're going to be discarded right away because you're going to have a hard time building that trust. Hey, the second part of that though is you talked about the relationships, right? So
Mhm.
once you identify who your target audience is, now you need that individual who has those connections, who has the authority with this audience and is willing to lend your stage to this individual so you can talk to their audience. Can you give us some more insights on ways to stand out, ways to build that trust with these individuals so you can get that stage time or you can get in front of the audience that you desire to be in front of?
Yeah, that's the key, and like you said, you have to be credible, and so this is where a lot of people fail too. They reach out to people and they just, for example, like let's say if I want to go on a podcast, you just send out an email and be like, hey, this is why I should be on your podcast. Here's who I am. Here's what I do. Here's how great I am. And that's what a lot of people do is they start off talking all about themselves. um, but really the key to it is learning something. And the other thing I guess connected to that is people don't really personalize it for one person. They have this pitch that they've written and they send it to 1,000 different people. It's they don't change it for the individual person. And so really the key is to learn something about that person that you're talking to, figure out what kind of connection do you have with them? What do you have in common with them? What do what do they talk about that resonates with you, or how can you provide value to them, or something like that, something that they care about. Start off with what they care about. Don't just jump right into a pitch. And because we all get those all the time. I may get emails every week, somebody pitching me on something, and it's just like I look at it, I'm like, okay, they have no idea who I am or what my business is. Delete, and that's what we all get that. And so if you want to be taken seriously, you have to get people's attention. And like in that first opening of your message, it needs to be very clear that this was written specifically for this person. I know who you are. I've, I've spent some time learning something about you before I reached out. And I think that's really probably the most critical part. And, is reaching out in a way that um, feels specific, to that person. And then also leading with the value to them. Like, what are they going to get out of this? Why should they care? Because that's what we all want to know. Why should I care about this message? And so it needs to be very clear from the beginning. This is why this matters to you. This is what's in it for you. Um, and then, finally, you can mention like what's in it for you, what it is that you're looking for, um, and then just a very simple, clear ask, that doesn't require um, you know, a lot of thinking and deliberation or planning. Like just a very simple ask to find out if the person is interested or not, is really key. And so, yeah, that's the basic formula. Just reaching out in a way that, but I guess really the key point is focus on the other person, learn about them, speak to them specifically. If your message could be sent to 100 different people without changing a word, then it's not good. It's not going to work.
And just changing the name or the
Yeah.
host title is not sufficient. Writing the same message and say, hi, John, I love your show, Multifamily Insights. And I'm wondering if and everything else is the same. That's not
Yeah.
enough either. We can read through it and see that. Great stuff. Great stuff, Todd. You talked about three things, right? So one is you want to make sure that you are reaching out and providing, first of all, a personalized message, right? Make sure it's really personalized to the individual. Second thing is let them know the clear value you're looking to provide to their audience. What is that clear value? Why should this person care? Then you want to be somewhat transparent about your desires, right? Why do you want to do this? Hey, I'm launching a new book. Hey, I'm working on a new program. They want to know because no one likes to sit in a situation where you're going to get pitched something, but you don't
Yeah.
know what the pitch is or why someone's doing this, right? We know
Right.
that no one cold emails out of the goodness out of their heart, right?
Yeah. Right.
So there's usually something there. And the sooner you can get that out there, if that value exceeds what I need, I don't care. That's great, right? As
Yeah.
long as we can protect my audience and I can verify you. So then you've got to go get your credentials out there and earn that trust and then get to kind of your clear ask. So I love that process and that setup, right? You talked about again personalizing the message, offer the clear value and present, build up your own credibility, showcase or demonstrate why you're looking to do this now and go ahead and make the ask. If you can do that, you're going to see better results on this outreach than if you don't go in. We talked about the trust and the warm relationships, the warm introductions. We kind of skipped over that part. How do we lock in to make sure it's not a cold email or a cold outreach as opposed to maybe getting more warmer introductions?
Well, I mean, with the outreach you're doing to somebody, get in front of somebody else's audience. Sometimes it might be somewhat cold, but you make it less cold by figuring out something you have in common with them. So, that's where like some research goes in. And it's time consuming. AI can help with that some I found now, but not. It's still you're gonna have to put your brain into it, and you're gonna have to think about this person and try to learn something about them. I mean, ideally, sometimes you can get a referral from somebody else, but when you're starting out, trying to use this method, you might not have any of those. And so, although if you do, that's always good to look for because that's definitely going to make it a lot easier. But if you are reaching out cold to this person that has an audience, um, don't make it so cold by learning something about them. So doing some research, like look at their website, look at their um, social media, look at whatever they're doing. If it's a podcast, listen to some episodes, learn something about them, and figuring out, you know, what do they care about? What do they say? Listen to some phrases that they're saying and like figure out, okay, what's important to them. And that will go a long ways because you're going to find eventually some kind of a connection, but maybe you already have some kind of connection. You guys, you both went to the same event or um, you know, I mean, there's something that is more, the more tangible you can make it, the better. If you've been in the same space or you've been, uh, and this is kind of we can get into that later too a little bit more the benefits of this, but this is something that can build or um, kind of compound over time because let's say this for a simple example, you go on a podcast. Well, now that's going to make it easier to get on the next podcast because you have already been on one, and that person might even put you in touch with somebody else. So those kind of things can compound over time. But yeah, just doing all that you can to really know the person that you're reaching out to.
Yeah, you talked about one, get to know the individual as much as you can, find some commonalities and use that to build a quick rapport, build relationship. The second way, again, find that referral. If you've done a show, maybe that person has interviewed somebody else or someone else has a podcast, or you can find other guests, but figure out how you can leverage some referrals there because that's going to help tremendously to get in front of more people. I mean, as you and I were talking backstage, we were talking about, other connections we have and conferences and different events. And I mean, that's real relationship stuff, right? It's just getting to know people and, hey, you attended this event. How was it? Who was there? Oh, and talk to this guy, or that's how you go, right? So if you can lean
Right.
into some of that, that's awesome. When you're starting out, way harder, right? Because you don't
Yeah.
have that connective tissue. You don't have the 5 years speaking experience and being on these different stages and speaking at these different conferences. So you got to figure out the intro, right? What's going to open up the door? What's going to get the ball rolling with some of these relationships? And find that person who can make the introduction. And this is again where LinkedIn is a great resource, right? If you know you're looking for a certain type of audience, maybe you just have somebody connected, right? And maybe you can ask for that introduction there. Maybe you can reach out and say, hey, I just saw we were connected to such and such. I actually went to school with them, whatever the case may be, right? But now you can start to build some rapport so that it's not so cold of an outreach. I absolutely love that, Todd. You mentioned AI being able to help with some of this. We know AI has taken over. It is, it's everything now. So
Yeah.
just that best ever conference, which we were talking about, and about three different speakers talked about how to leverage AI in 2026. The tasks that it can do, the role it plays in capital raising and analyzing deals and operations, managing the existing portfolio. It's incredible how much AI has grown in the last 6 to 12 months. How are you seeing AI being utilized today, and where do you think is the greatest upside for capital raisers?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things it can do. But I think it's really important to before you before you use it to have your own process in place and your own strategy because if you're using AI before you're ready for it, if you don't have the strategy, you're just kind of um, basically creating garbage a lot faster, or mediocre content or whatever it is. And so I think understanding what you're doing first is a very important step, but then seeing how you can use it to do something you're already doing better or faster. And so I mean, I think one important way is creating content. I mean, well, as we're all in the marketing business, and so we have to create content, and but I see a lot of people going about that the wrong way though by they create content and it sounds like it was written by AI. If that's the case, then you're doing it wrong. It should sound like you, and so um, I think that's something you can leverage for sure. It can save hours and hours of your time. Whether that's creating your newsletter, creating your social media posts, any kind of communication you have, I think it can save a lot of time, but you have to make sure it's doing it in your voice, because if it's not, then you're kind of diluting your brand. Your people don't really you're not really building trust if it doesn't sound like you. You're um, so it needs to sound exactly like if you wrote it, and that's a key is knowing how to train AI to sound like you, so that it is. And you need to be involved in the process too. I would never just like hand off something completely to AI and let it, create something to send that out to my audience without, having my input on it first. So, and that's I think a mistake sometimes people make too. Like, oh yeah, sounds good enough. Copy paste send. But so yeah, that's some ways that I've what we've used it to help. Also with this process that I'm talking about with trying to find people to partner with, you can use it for that too. Like just in the research phase, like doing some of the research, trying to find like what connections you might have with that person already. Um, and then kind of you can also if the AI is trained, it can also analyze the pitch that you're sending to make sure it's kind of following the formula basically. So a few different ways.
I think what's incredible, man, is I feel like whenever you sit and think about applications for AI, you come up with like just new ideas that you haven't thought of. And as you were talking, You talked about content creation, and we're going to come right back to that. But content creation is one of the ways, or helping you identify, potential resources or outlets for you to connect with, podcasts to reach out to, things like that. Um, but then there's also, like, the management of those relationships, the CRM process and other elements where you could tap into it. And I was even just thinking about, like, in our podcast outreach, that's something that my team's been handling for years now. But to figure out where there's connective tissue, and we've done almost 800 podcast episodes at this point. So we can figure out, hey, are there shows that we want to be on, or guests that we want to have, where our guests have also been on those shows, or the host has been on our show, but maybe we didn't reach out to those individuals. And that's something that's very tedious for
Yeah.
our team to sit and do. But AI can probably go out there and scrape all of this in
Yeah.
seconds, if not a couple minutes, and give me kind of a top 50 or top 100 list, right? So
Right.
these are the applications where you hear people talk about AI. And yes, it can be overwhelming. It can be cliche. It can feel like, okay, we get it. But these are the little things that can separate those players from major success and the folks who don't get traction. Because again, if you can identify a way to, I'm just going to use it, right? If I wanted to get on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? Like, number one podcast out there, right? In my mind, I don't know anyone who has gotten on there. However, I know for a fact that if I sat and really analyzed all the connections, like who's on the team, who's here, who's there, what have I done maybe in a previous life, I'm sure I could find some connections to get me
Yeah.
closer there, or to craft a pitch. And again, he may still say, hell no, right? Maybe I got to go to that next rung beneath that. But the bottom line
Mhm.
is, now you're inching towards where you want to be. I had this conversation
Right.
with a good friend of mine before, and we were talking about podcasting, and he was able to get some pretty high level guests on his show. And I asked him, and he literally was like, well, I had one person who was fairly well known, and I saw that they actually knew that individual, so I pitched them and said, hey, I just spoke to such and such. And they were like, oh, okay, well, if you just
Yeah.
spoke to them, again, that stamp of approval, right? That authority,
Right.
that referral. So then that person came on. And then once they got that person, guess what? They use that to get the next big person. And now they're getting this string of large talent, well known celebrities to come on their show, because they made that one connection, that outreach, and that kind of soft referral. So you
Yeah.
can definitely grow and scale, but AI can take the legwork of the research. And I think that's one of the best applications, is research. Now, I will tell you, you got to double check the research sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
I've had to do some things that I'm like, that's not right.
Right.
Like, just basic math. I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
how you're doing your math, but that is terrible. Can you please check that? They're like, oh, you're right, John. Sorry. I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like AI should be able to do basic math. Like, my third
I
grader,
know.
my fourth
Yeah.
grader could get that right, and you're sitting here struggling with basic addition and subtraction. So, trust,
Yeah.
again, take it at a very high level, but it can do a lot of that legwork. You have to check it, but that's one of the best benefits I see of AI, is taking some of those tasks that would take you maybe 30 minutes or an hour to do, let it do it in 1 or 2 minutes. Check it, make sure it's accurate, push it, but again, that's work that would have maybe taken you an hour. You can get it done in 5 minutes using AI. That's a great time
Yeah.
saver. Now you got 55 more minutes to go apply to other more beneficial parts of your business.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I'm kind of excited about, we're just kind of recently learning about, but there's one of the AI tools I like a lot is called Claude. I found it works the
Yep.
best for content creation. But there's a new thing. I just realized that you can install an app on your computer, and there's this thing called Cowork where you can give it tasks to do, and it's much more thorough. It'll even do work on your computer. It'll create a PowerPoint presentation for you or different things like that. But also, you can set it to do recurring tasks. So you can say every Monday morning at this time, like go out and find all of this, information, compile this research, put it into an Excel spreadsheet by this time, and it will do it, on a recurring basis, which is kind of amazing. But yeah, the potential is just it kind of mind boggling. Is just figuring out how do I harness that for my own business, and that's
Yeah.
kind of the challenge sometimes.
I love it. Well, lots of great stuff, man. We talked a lot about building trust and understanding that we are in a trust recession, how to navigate and operate in this world, particularly for those folks who are raising capital for apartment syndications. Todd, for folks that want to reach out, they can go to apartmentinvestorpro.com. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. But right now, we're going to transition and go to our round of insights. When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7 questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to the show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. All right, Todd, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Well, for one, it was when in an earlier business when we were doing single family, I didn't really recognize the importance of what I was talking about today, the importance of partnerships, of relationships. And so I saw a competitor come in and kind of make all those relationships and kind of dominated the market. So when we, branched out, I learned from that mistake. And that's kind of been our focus is it's all about relationships, build partnerships. And now, we have partnerships that have been, like I said, it compounds. So some of those pay off for, 7 years more, we're still getting referrals. And so it's totally, definitely makes sense to focus on that. So that's a big lesson learned.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your listeners or for our listeners.
Yeah, I think I would go with Claude AI. It's so powerful. I've seen a world of difference when it comes to creating content with AI. So yeah, that'd be my recommendation.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
That's a good question. That's a good one. I'm not quite sure the most. There's a few that I've recommended quite a bit. I'm just going to mention one that comes to mind that is I probably haven't recommended the most in the last year, but it's one that I do like. It's called How to Get Everything You Can Out of Everything You've Got by Jay Abraham. It's just a good all-around marketing book that it talks about, just strategies basically for marketing your business. And I think it can be applied to just about any business. So it's one I'd suggest reading if you're getting into marketing.
What's the daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I have a morning routine where I get up and have, certain things I do every day. And one thing that I really like is I do journaling in a very specific way where I analyze the different areas of my life and rate them and then I rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. And then I figure out what's missing for that to be a 5. And that lets me know what I need to focus on in my life. And so, and realizing that your business is very much connected to your personal life. So if something is off in your personal life, it's going to affect your business. So it's good to recognize those things early and address them so that everything runs more smoothly.
Give me your number 1 insight for building trust and relationships.
Focus on the other person. Figure out what they care about, what problem you can solve for them, what do they care about, what value can you provide. If you do that, the relationships will kind of take care of themselves.
All right. And you are out there in Pennsylvania right now. So give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
It's a small town, so there's not a lot. There's a little place called Boxers that I like, and they have like awesome burger and fries, like home, fresh cut fries. So yeah, it's good beer on tap, all that kind of stuff. So it's a nice little place. There's not a lot around here though, so I beyond that, I think of when I'm traveling, I have favorite places all over, but that's favorite local place.
Boxers it is. Well, listen, Todd, great stuff, man. You talked about, again, building trust, understanding that we are in a trust recession. What do you need to do to stand out? We don't want to send the cold text messages, the cold emails. We want to focus on referrals and building warm relationships. That way you are allowed to stand out, focusing on the other person. What do they need? What are they looking for? How can you help solve their problems? That's going to help you stand out And then when it comes to AI, recognizing that Claude and other platforms have a lot of value, and it really is a means to take time and pressure off of your shoulders, alleviate some of this, and really streamline some of your efforts so you can run a little bit faster and do more deals. Again, for folks that want to learn more, they can check out apartmentinvestorpro.com. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Todd, thanks again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.